Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Powerful on Purpose podcast, where it is our goal to find amazing women. There's no shortage who are really using their story and what changed life for them to improve the lives of other people. And today is no exception. Chris Vasiliadis. I'm going to mess that all up, got in my head on that one, right? Chris, say your last name for us.
My pleasure. It's a tricky one. It's Chris Vasiliadis.
We don't have to watch me mangle that up, right? I'm super excited to have a conversation with Chris because she is a burnout buster coach, right? Loving that. She's a consultant and trainer in her business Priority Wellness. And through various systems of sanity, because we all need more systems that bring in sanity, she helps individuals and teams improve vitality, focus, and performance without sacrificing their well-being. Chris is also the author of Ignition, a professional woman's guide to energized burnout-proof living, and has been relapse-free from multiple sclerosis for over 19 years. And I absolutely want you to share your story and what brought you to what you're doing here. And then I have a question about MS.
So yeah, sure. Yeah. All right. So we'll start with the story. So 3 years before I started my practice, Priority Wellness, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, came out of nowhere and had a certain set of symptoms that showed up, got some tests, got a second opinion, decided to wait a little bit, and then a second set of symptoms showed up, after which I was diagnosed. So I was lucky to be diagnosed pretty quickly. Symptoms showed up in October of a certain year, and I was diagnosed by early December. So that's pretty quick. It's not like you can do a blood test and find out whether or not you have MS. It's kind of a process of elimination. And so that caused a whole bunch of lifestyle changes for me. No one in my family then or since has had anything neurological in their body. And for folks who don't know what multiple sclerosis is, it's a chronic disease of the central nervous system with no cure. And so I got this diagnosis, met with my primary care physician. I said, okay, I have this diagnosis. It's my intention to live a fully active, healthy life. What should I be doing? And she lined me up with all kinds of tests. Ultimately learned a few things. One, that I'm not good with gluten. I don't have celiac disease, but I'm gluten sensitive. So I've been off gluten for almost 20 years now. But then I also started to make a lot of different lifestyle changes besides that. Stopping to eat the gluten, really actively managing my stress, being very mindful of how I use my energy and how I restore my energy. That first year, I needed a nap every day just to function. And so getting more in tune with that. And so over the next year and a half or so, I was getting more intentional with managing my own health and well-being and saw the benefits that it was giving me. And it occurred to me that, okay, and at the time I was doing marketing consulting and I was finishing up working with one of my clients who was a career coach. And it dawned on me that, okay, I'm helping people. I was working for small business owners at the time. I'm working for people who want to get more clients. I'm helping them write their website copy so it's more compelling and such. But if they're not healthy, this all means bupkis. And that was kind of like my light bulb moment. So when I was done working with that career coach, I looked at her and said, okay, now I need to hire you because I need to figure out what's next. I want to do something in the wellness space, but I don't know what that is. And through a series of conversations and networking with other people, I landed on deciding to become a health and wellness coach. So I spent the bulk of a particular year doing that and hung out my shingle in the fall of 2008. And so when I started Priority Wellness, I was primarily focused on stress management. And over the years, it's evolved into burnout prevention. So that's kind of the highlights, but happy to drill down deeper in whatever you would like.
Great. Well, I think what struck me in the introduction about MS, and you can tell me, is do you feel like part of your MS was caused by, or maybe exacerbated, I don't know that I want to say caused, and you can tell me, but there was some component of it that was stress related?
That's a really good question, and I do get asked that question or flavors of it a lot. The honest answer is I don't know, and they don't know what causes MS still, but they know the belief is that it's autoimmune. For some reason, your system starts attacking itself, and in the case of MS, we all have this insulation, if you will, around our nerves called myelin, which starts to disintegrate. And when that happens, so your nerves are more exposed, and that can show up in anything from cognitive issues to digestive issues to bathroom issues to memory, lethargy, whole host of things, tingling, numbness, mobility type issues. So it can show up a whole bunch of different ways, which again goes back to why it's tricky to diagnose. So yeah, I don't know, to be honest, Leslie. And either way, it woke me up to I can't take my health for granted. Like I have this chronic illness. If I don't take care of myself, at the time I remember reading something in a book and it said, and again, this was 2006. Well, I was diagnosed end of '05, so I'm reading these things in 2006. And at the time it said 15% of people who got diagnosed with MS would end up in a wheelchair. So I'm like, okay, my odds are pretty good that this is not going to happen to me. So I'm going to do everything in my power to prevent that from happening. So in hindsight, I would say I more looked forward versus looked back. I never was in a place of like, oh, woe is me, or oh, I must have caused this. It's more, all right, this is what I have. What can I do to live as fully and active as possible?
Well, and I think the other interesting thing is MS is still predominantly women, right? And women
Yes.
hitting a certain age is then like there's an explosion in. So I just find it interesting. Maybe someday we will find that connection, right? Between some sort of stress factors. But you're right. There's so many of those autoimmune diseases that specifically hit women, and they're like, we don't know why.
Well, and let's not gloss over the fact that chronic stress is held in the body.
Absolutely.
So if you are having chronic stress, it can make you more susceptible to chronic illnesses like diabetes, like rheumatoid arthritis, like high blood pressure, whatever. So yeah, let's not gloss over that.
Absolutely.
And again, I don't want to get into like people feeling like they're causing their illness, but it brings up a more compelling thing of, okay, where do I have my power? If I know that stress is ultimately going to reside in the body, if I'm not processing it and dealing with it effectively, I need to look at ways so I can manage it effectively and move through stressful situations without compromising my health.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Not so much as like I'm to blame, but as how do we mitigate this and how do we get it to a level where it doesn't escalate and potentially lead to things that are the bang on the head that we've got to switch our life around. So when you work with somebody, you take into consideration that whole person and what aspects of their life, or, do you have kind of buckets like we look at this first, or depending on the person?
Yeah, it really depends. I'm really a big believer in every person is kind of an experiment of one. And I love that you use the term whole person because that's how I consider people. If someone does happen to hire me and they are living with some chronic illness, I don't look at them as their illness. I look at them as the whole person. It's like I often tell people, like, yes, I'm someone living with MS, but that doesn't define me. It's just like I have hazel eyes. That's a piece of me, but that doesn't define me. So as far as where we start, it often and that's different for everybody too. But the fundamental questions I typically ask are, what's causing you the most angst? What's agitating you? What's depleting you? And and a lot of times people haven't paused long enough to ask themselves those questions. So oftentimes it's the first time that they're hearing that. They just know they're struggling in some area. Or symptoms are showing up and manifesting, and it's often things like they're exhausted, they feel overwhelmed, they feel overstretched, they feel like the pace at which they're operating is not sustainable, and they know they want to change, but they don't know where to begin. So that's where we help. And I never try to overhaul everything all at once, because that's not achievable either. I don't want to give someone a ton of to-dos. It's more kind of focused on kind of stepping back, taking a pause, taking a beat, and just stepping back and kind of observing what's going on in your life right now, personally and professionally. What resources are pulling at you? What resources do you have? And what's taking you away from feeling like your best self? And sometimes they don't know that right off the bat. A lot of times there's a lot of question and dialogue to get to the root of that, but they just know they're suffering on some level, and they want the suffering to stop.
Sure. I think we can all identify that, right? We know there's something wrong. We might not be able to pinpoint it. And I love that acknowledgement of really being able to step back and say, wait a minute. So let's just pinpoint that one area right off the bat that's causing you the most anxiety and start there.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if they don't know, if they know like the top three, we're like, okay, pick one. Like what feels the most compelling? and maybe not start with what feels like the hardest thing. Start with the low-hanging fruit and let's make some progress, because incremental progress and baby steps, they build upon each other. But it's better than staying still and stuck.
Exactly right. And I'm guessing like when you can get people to make a couple steps, it gets easier, right? Because now it's not as big a scary thing, and they're like, I see this made progress, then I'm excited because there's possibility.
Absolutely.
Right.
Progress begets more progress. And oftentimes we get so in our head that sometimes we make out that, oh, this is going to be so hard. And then you start doing it. It's like, oh, all right, I can do that. And guess what? The world's still spinning. Like, the world didn't come to a halt because for whatever thing, like maybe I decided to delegate something. Maybe I decided to delay something. Maybe I decided to work on something in small steps. Maybe I'm allowing myself to take breaks during the day, and the world is not falling apart. In fact, it's better. So yeah, people get often pleasantly surprised for a variety of reasons when they start taking small steps that benefit their overall well-being.
Sure, sure. Well, talk to us a little bit about, because you're the burnout buster, right? And I know your free gift is helping people burnout proof their life, right? So
Yeah.
what suggestions do you give people for, because I think you made a great point. Sometimes we don't even recognize it's burnout, right? We excuse it like, oh, I'm not sleeping well or whatever, when actually maybe there is some aspect of burnout to it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you pointed that out, Leslie, because often we don't see it in ourselves. It's often either a loved one or a close friend who's pointing it out. It could even be a colleague or someone at work who just sees you not being yourself. And what it could show up at and look like is things like skipping meals or overeating, being more irritable, being more exhausted, being late on deadlines, or forgetting people's names, forgetting where you put your keys. None of that is typical of you. And it's stuff that has been noticeable over time. And that's another thing to keep in mind with burnout. It's not like you have an exceedingly stretched day and come home and say, oh, I'm burnt out. No, it's something that builds up over time. So yes, oftentimes it's someone else noticing it in you versus you noticing it in yourself first. And then from there, in terms of tips, again, the particular tip I might share or things that I might invite folks to experiment with, at a high level, it's either different ways of doing or different ways of being. Again, it's not like, okay, now you need to take this action. It's a lot of times it can be like, all right, well, how can this whole notion of trying to be Superwoman, for example, and realizing like, okay, that's not sustainable. It's not realistic. Okay, so what might it be like to give yourself more compassion and realizing that that's not necessarily something to aim for? So they might just practice in having more compassion for themselves, being more kind to themselves. A lot of times people kind of sheepishly say, all right, I know I need to put myself first. But there's not a lot of confidence behind that. It's like, okay, they know that they've come to that place. It's like, all right, well, let's start with what would that look like? And just start exploring. I'm often very playful in our work together. Like, it's a big sandbox. Let's play and let's try different things. Like, okay, well, where do you want to put yourself first? Do you want to do it at work? Do you want to do it with your family at home? Do you want to do it in another type of setting? What's possible? And what would that look like? Might that look like giving yourself some breaks? Might that be pausing and listening to like, okay, what needs to be tended to right now? Might it be you've been saying for a long time, oh, I'll get to this someday, or I'll get to this when this happens. Well, what's that this? And what's stopping you from doing that now, even in a small way? There's a lot of that in the world of, well, I'll get to this when this is complete. And then there's usually something else that we come up with. So it's also kind of checking in on, well, is this really right for you now? Mm. And because people might have gotten stuck in, oh, this worked for me in my 20s and 30s, and now I'm in my 40s and 50s. So that worked in my 20s and 30s, so that's probably going to work now. Well, maybe not. So that's the other thing I pinpoint in my work with folks is figuring out what works for them in their current season of life. You might have done Zumba classes in your 20s and 30s. That might not be appealing to you or workable for you now in your 40s and 50s. So let's figure out another way to give you more energy. What feels exciting to you? What have you seen other people do? Like, that looks kind of cool. And again, bringing fun into it. Like, what might you find enjoyable?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't have to beat ourselves up over that and get into like, oh, I should do this. Like, when I hear the word should, that's a flag for me. Like, okay, is it a should or is it a want? Like, do you feel pulled to it or pushed to it? And again, we don't often stop to truly consider the impact of our words. And okay, is what I'm saying actual truth now, or is there something truer and more real and more authentic now? So it's a lot of what we, rather than me like throwing out a tip, it's kind of getting down to, well, what would be appealing to you now? What seems interesting or exciting or compelling? Yeah, and I think the other thing that would be helpful for me to share is often when I start with working people, we create what I call a wellness vision, which is basically a 3 to 5 sentence description of what they want to create out of their health and well-being. Because I could line 10 different people up and say, okay, what's your ideal vision? What's yours? I'm going to get 10 different answers. So it becomes very customized to what it is you want to create. What do you want to create? Why? How are you going to feel? How do you think you'll feel when that happens? And then we start moving in that direction. So that's something your listeners could ask ask themselves now, like, okay, if I could wave a magic wand, what do I want to create out of my health and well-being? What would that look like? What would I be saying about myself? What would other people be saying about me? And then start to look, okay, well, what's some baby steps I can take, not to try to create that whole thing? Because I usually say, okay, if you could wave a magic wand and have your ideal health and well-being in a year, what would that look like? So then start taking baby steps to move in that direction. And you could do that on your own or do that with collaborating with someone like me.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And that's great suggestions that we all should look at, right? Because I think too, the other thing that I hear you saying is being realistic about our dreams or our plan, right, of health and wellness. Now, I am never going to be Barbie. Right. I am not built that way. I'm just saying, like, I got the J-Lo booty, folks. So never going to be Barbie. But yeah, what is it that I want this body to do? And what do I need to do to get it to that level or keep it at that level?
Absolutely. Yeah. And for you, it might be focused on your body. For some people, it might be focusing on their mental well-being. For others, it might be their spiritual well-being or some combination thereof. So yeah, it's giving ourselves permission to go after what we want.
Ooh.
And not thinking like, oh, society says I should do this. Okay, well, what do you want though? So yeah, I often find I'm bringing people back to really deeply asking themselves, so in your heart of hearts, what do you want?
Exactly.
And often we're not asking ourselves that or giving ourselves permission to go there. And that's a big part of what happens in my work with folks.
Right. I think not only not giving ourselves permission, but we're apologizing. You kind of alluded to this, right? We're apologizing for wanting whatever it is we want. I think particularly women, right?
Yeah, totally. And again, I will say this to your listeners, you're already worthy. There is nothing to earn. You're already worthy of the health and well-being that you want. So you don't have to like try to work at it to get it. Today, you are worthy and you always have been.
Right. And that takes some rewiring, I think, for a lot of people. Wholeness is your default. As you said, we are whole right now. Maybe we could be better. That's a different issue, right? But as we are whole.
Yeah, it's a matter of recognizing that, accepting it, and then, okay, given that, anything's possible. Truly.
Right.
Like, the possibilities are endless. So what do you want to create? Let's do it. And so that gets exciting too when people realize that. And I often say, I'll often hear from people, my coaching clients, like, oh, you're such a good coach and whatever. I'm like, okay, and you're the one doing the work. If someone is making changes, it's not about me pulling them along, kicking and screaming. That's not an ideal situation. The folks who come to work with me are ready to do the work, roll up their sleeves, make changes, learn about themselves, and grow. And the people who have the most success are the ones who deeply do the work. And through all the forward movement, ahead days and behind days, and I set people's expectations ahead of time. That's what habit change is like. It's not a straight line. It's more of a zigzag. So there will be ahead days and behind days. It's not a matter of willpower. There's a lot of brain science involved in that. We're retraining our brain for new ways of conditioning and behaving. So that's going to happen. And so I set that expectation with people. So when the day comes that they do have a backslide, they don't automatically just throw up their hands like, oh, this isn't working, I'm done. I'm like, nope, that's actually showing that it's working. And now how much do you want it? And either we can figure out a different way. There's multiple ways to get to that end wellness vision. The wellness vision doesn't say anything about the how. It just says, this is what I want. And we figure out the how along.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. Very cool. Well, I know we could go on and talk like for hours probably, but I know you have a free gift, and the 9 mistakes that prevent people from burnout proofing their life. So everybody's going to want to get that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so it's a free report, very easy, very digestible. So it has 9 different mistakes that people make, basically how to get in their own way. But then for each mistake, I have a tip for, okay, here's how you turn that around. And that's available on my website on PriorityWellness.com/free report. And when you sign up for that, you'll also get added to my newsletter, which is called Energizing You, where you'll get access to free monthly tips plus future appearances when I'm on webinars or different speaking engagements that you can attend.
Yeah, perfect. Well, is there any last words of wisdom you want to share with our audience?
Just find a way to be kind to yourself today. Start there.
Yeah, that's really good.
We don't often stop to do it. We're often beating ourselves up. That might look like an action. That might look like watching your language. If you habitually kind of beat yourself up and self-critical, we all can do that one-on-one. You can just kind of stop, pause, put your hand in your heart and say, not today, sweetheart. And that can be a way to start to catch that when it happens.
I love that. Be kind to yourself. And though I got to tell you, when you said watch your language, I was like, how does Chris know that I curse? And I'm like, well, that's not what she's saying.
There's a lot of self-criticism out there. So it's very common that we more empowering when we pump ourselves up.
Well, it has been a super delight, and you have shared some great gold nuggets, Chris. So I really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, Leslie. This was fun. Thanks so much for having me today.
Absolutely. And for all the watchers, be sure and subscribe. And if you love today's conversation, give us a rating wherever on all the sites. But stay tuned, because we are always bringing you fascinating women who have different stories and using those stories to build businesses and really impact the world. Because if women had been driving the bus, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. And so we need more women leading the bus, taking over the steering wheel.
Amen to that.